Welcome everybody to the dog control bylaw deliberations. We're going to open with a karakia for the day. Karakia tātou, tue ki runga, tue ki raro, tue ki roto, tue ki waho. Tue tātou te tangata ki te kaupapa o te hui nei, ki te kaupapa o te rangi nei, mauri ora ki a tātou katoa. We have some people on Zoom. For anyone on Zoom who would speak, which I don't know that people up there are, I can't quite read the names, but we don't have staff there, do we? No.
That's up there as well as here.
Yes. So people on Zoom, if they can keep their microphones muted, thank you. Any apologies for the meeting? No. And any declarations of interest? No. Which brings me to you, Kat, and the deliberations report, extensive as it is.
Thank you, Chair, and also express our appreciation for the commitment that the hearing panel has shown. It's been a bit of a journey, and we appreciate the work that's gone into it and the critical thinking behind this as well from you. So the report summarises the public feedback that we received during the consultation process. We received 645 submissions, and we had 50 people present their submissions in person or on Zoom to the council on hearings day. In addition to the location-specific feedback, we also identified some key themes from the free text submissions, which were opposition to various dog restrictions, the socio-emotional benefits of dogs and dog walking. There were a lot of conservation concerns. Community division regarding dog control regulations came up a lot. Dog and environmental advocates not being mutually exclusive. Further clarity required of the regulations and a request for more education. Health and safety concerns were raised, along with some dog park requests. We also had some feedback around the enforcement and registration fees. More provisions for dog waste facilities were requested. There was also some general support for some of the proposed content or calls for further restrictions on where dogs could be. And we also had some feedback around the summer months definition. Those have been gone into in more detail in section 5 of the report, but unless there's anything in particular that needs to be discussed, I'll take those general themes as read. Oh. And our suggestion for today is that we start by referring to the changes that we're proposing to make to the draft bylaw and work through those first. Then we can look to what we're proposing to keep the same as what was in the draft bylaw, and then finish off with the clause changes that we're suggesting as a result of both consultation and things that staff have picked up during the process as well.
Thanks, Kat. That's a good approach.
There'll also be a couple of items that we will table, but we'll address those when we get to those specific locations as well. Okay, so we'll start with staff are recommending a change from Tomatea Reserve. We're starting up in Golden Bay, Tomatea Reserve to Shores Creek Bridge. We're suggesting that the mapping and the description changes to the beach adjacent to northern boundary of Tomatea Reserve to Shores Creek Bridge. That just enables people with dogs to be able to walk through the reserve in order to access the beach. There's also a resolution following that around changing the description and the mapping of the dog controlled exercise area that's adjacent to that on Pakawa Beach, so that people can basically cut through Tomatea Reserve and then they can turn right and walk the rest of the way down the beach. It's just that particular point that we were trying to protect the wildlife values there, and the prohibition in the reserve area was really an unintended consequence that we hadn't wanted to achieve.
As you're going through each of these, Kat, it might be difficult to, but if you're able, are you able to if we, even just the page number in our report, because our table of contents doesn't bring up the maps. Anyway, we can find them, but to be able to, for us to be able to just be looking at that each time would be helpful, I think. Can we do
Matt
that
is
on there?
looking to share his screen so that we can zoom in on the particular areas that we're discussing.
It's easy enough. Yeah.
In the meantime, it's page 96 on the bylaw.
Great, thank you. That's helpful if we can.
Oh, actually, maybe it's not. It might be the old one. Yeah, that's not the deliberations version. Yeah.
So 96 of the report or 96 on LG Hub? On our.
One moment, please. Apologies, I did my own binding this morning and I've done things in the wrong order. So we're just tracking through to find it, and Matt's getting it up on the screen for you now.
Okay. Oh, you want to scoot around to go to see? Oh, I'm just. Oh, yeah, there it goes. There. Yes. I've just got a question. Yeah, I'm gonna.
We've also just noted there may be an error in the mapping. We have found it, but that's a map that hadn't got updated in the process. So apologies for that, but this is the correct version that we're showing you on the screen now, so that you can see where.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Butler has a question.
Sure.
Thanks very much. Yeah, so this is probably applies to other situations as well. So with the rest of the, when it's low tide, there's a whole lot of sand flat exposed there, and we haven't got it covered. And that is, there's a lot of birds roosting out there. How are we going to manage that from a compliance point of view, in terms of if you've got dogs that are out beyond the red area? Are we how are you going to interpret it? Thanks.
Through Chair, any dogs that are outside of that red area under the Act and under the bylaw are allowed to be there, but they still have to be under control and not worrying wildlife. So that's an obligation under the Dog Control Act. So the dogs are allowed to be there. It's an implicit exercise area, so it's not explicitly stated in the bylaw. But anywhere that isn't explicitly stated, there's still a control area. The dog has to be under control.
Okay, thanks. This will. I think this will be the case with quite a few of the sand flat areas. Yeah, where we've got it marked there, but it's at low tide. There will be areas that are not covered, and there will be dogs out there, as I've experienced myself. But that's just, okay.
It's inevitable, isn't it? And it's helpful to hear about, be reminded of the Act and what applies. Thank you. Matt, you've got a point?
Yeah, and then through the chair, the one of the main reasons from the wildlife perspective of just having those prohibitions on the high tide areas is that those are the high tide roosting areas of a lot of these birds. So they'll utilize a lot of the sand flat, but kind of as the water comes in, this is where they'll make all their nests, and those are the areas that we really want to protect, as opposed to making it prohibitive for the entirety of the estuary.
It's very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything further here? Okay.
In terms of the resolutions, I'll just run through all of them and then we'll manage them as a whole at the end.
In terms of resolution,
Yes.
yes.
Okay,
I just, if there are, I think as you're going through these changes, if people are wanting to make a comment or ask something, then
yeah,
we'll do that as we go.
Okay. It may be helpful to keep the screen up with the mapping at this point as we go along. Okay, so with Whakawa Beach, we've just extended, that was already proposed to be a controlled exercise area. We've just extended it up so that it's clear where that starts up at the Tomatea Reserve and that it goes right the way down the beach as well. That was previously a little bit of a no man's land, and so we just clarified that dogs can exercise there as well. So that is for Resolution 5B. Okay, we are moving down to Ruataniwha Inlet in Collingwood. So we have a resolution to remove the boat ramp and the car park area from that prohibited zone. That had been carried over from the previous bylaw. However, we got some feedback around people being able to access that area to get their dogs onto boats. So we've just removed that particular part from the bylaw, and we've also added in an extra clause there to specify that, you know, when it is high tide and dogs are accessing boats, they can be in that area, provided they are contained within a vessel.
Yes, and I think this is an example of where this was in the old bylaw, the bit about the ramp, and it was in the old bylaw, but people weren't aware of it. And so when it came out this time, it was a bit of a response to that, like, oh, why would you do that? And I think there wasn't really an understanding of it being that case. So
yes, that's it's an example of where we'd like to really improve signage and education as well. You know, when we went into the site visit, it was clear that perhaps hadn't been communicated well in the past. So I've spoken to D as well around the exemption for dogs contained in vessels. We are also proposing to remove the Collingwood Holiday Park from the dog control policy and the bylaw, and that just to that's something that we're recommending for all the council campgrounds, just to enable them to manage that through their own policies. We don't want them to end up being in breach of the bylaw because they own their own dogs and live on site or something like that. And it's just a better way of managing it when we know that even though it's not zoned, we still have the Dog Control Act to fall back on as well. Dogs still need to be under control in those areas. So it's not necessarily like a no man's land where no rules apply. It's just that we're not applying the specifics of the dog control bylaw there to just enable a little bit more flexibility for them and to manage things according to how they would like to.
And you've spoken with camp managers, some of them, and
Yes.
that's their preference. Are they happy with that?
In the case of the Poharo one, their initial preference was to still be included. However, they wanted a bit of a bespoke arrangement, and we still feel on reflection that it's better that if they want to have something unique, we don't want it to be confusing with other parts of the beach that are nearby, and so they can still manage that and have their own policies in place, which people need to follow through on. And yeah, once again, Dog Control Act where all else fails.
Thank you.
The next change that staff are recommending is in the Parawhakaohu River mouth. This was an area in the draft that we had suggested as a dogs prohibited area for the wildlife concerns. We had a variety of feedback on this one on both sort of ends of the spectrum. We had a submission initially from the national branch of Forest and Bird, which suggested that dogs would be prohibited during those key nesting months, but then the rest of the year they could be allowed leash control to pass through this area. And we felt that that struck a good balance. Yesterday we were made aware that they had actually accidentally sent in a previous submission rather than a new one for this round of consultation. So they have requested that comment in section 5.146 of the report be corrected, as they no longer support this position. They would prefer it to be prohibited outright. The correct version of the intended submission has been sent through. However, staff haven't had the capacity over the last 24 hours to review this and identify if there are any other instances where Forest and Bird NZ may wish to retract or change their position as it's recorded in the deliberations report. Regardless of this change of position, staff are still recommending that the Parawhakaohu River mouth area is changed to a seasonally restricted area. We feel that this strikes a balance between protecting wildlife during particularly vulnerable times while allowing leash-controlled access the remainder of the year.
Councillor Butler has a question, perhaps.
Oh, sorry, it's just a question for me, actually.
Yeah. Question for you, Matt.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, just the seasonal restriction. So September to February.
Could you put your mic on, Matt, if it's not? Thank you.
Yep, from September to February they are prohibited, and then from March to August is when they're allowed there on leashes. I'll change that spelling error now.
So you think September is related to the is that the banded dotterels or which particular?
So that's the kind of core bird breeding season for the range of birds which have been there, and that's kind of New Zealand wide.
So that time span will encompass the whole thing from, nesting right through to fledging at the other end, pretty much.
For most species, there's potential that some species will have second broods and clutches, but that's the core season, sort of at the beginning of spring until that clutch will have fledged, we hope.
Yeah. That's an example, isn't it, of how we are going to need to be thoughtful around helping people to understand the why and the how we're going to let people know. When you get to this point, pop your dog on your leash, please. And I think there's a whole conversation to have later about how we're going to do that and manage that, and have primarily, I guess, the communities at Pattons Rock and people that live around there to know that's how come, and it's a whole area, I think, where we've got a piece where you're walking along the beach and then you hit a spot after quite a while where you need to do something different than how we convey that's going to be important. Thanks, Kat.
Thank you. The next resolution is to change the description rotatai from western end of the Gulf Course to Waitapu Estuary foreshore, excluding the controlled dog exercise area and Rotatai Recreation Reserve. That description in the mapping just needs to change to indicate that we're also excluding the Motupipi Beachfront Reserve as well, which previously wasn't indicated in that description, but it's something that we've rolled back on. you like me to try and drive this?
Yeah. Is there a way that we can get the page numbers for our LG Hub or the report? Just about if we can't. 192? 119 on the report?
We're looking at this really big section of prohibited, and it's just really to identify that we've made a change down here, and that's reflected in the description and also in the mapping. Just to include that we're excluding Motupepe Reserve beachfront.
Thank you.
On to H, we are proposing to remove Rototai closed landfill from the dog control policy and bylaw. We noted when the policy was being adopted for consultation, there was a request that we do some testing of the soils in that area. We've inquired about having this done and have been advised that the expense and fitting it into that team's budget made it not a possibility at this time. So in the meantime, we're just pulling back and removing it and not recommending it as a controlled exercise. It could be that changes in the future, but at the moment, we're leaving that status quo. I is to change the Motupepe Reserve beachfront Rototai Recreation Reserve to the headland. In the draft bylaw, it was a leash control area, and we're proposing to change this to a controlled exercise area, which is the green highlight that you can see where just along the foreshore there.
Is this one, sorry?
Are
we here or we further across?
We are on.
Yeah.
I.
All right, cool. Thank you. There was just a comment that there's possibly a new attendee trying to access the Zoom meeting. All right, cool. Thank you.
And just the thinking behind that?
When this was initially proposed to be an on-leash exercise area along that foreshore, we'd had some submissions around the wildlife values there and the early engagement, and it does show up this whole area as part of our important birds layer. And so we didn't want to prohibit dogs completely, as was suggested in this area, and so we wanted to sort of strike that balance with the leash control. However, when we did the consultation, we heard that the voices of the community, that they wanted to retain some off-leash exercise area along here, and also the original submitters changed their position on this as well. And so we also mindful that it is still a significant bird area, also did a site visit on this area and decided that along that particular stretch, that risk was relatively low, whereas some of the areas sort of on the headland out towards the end, sort of where the words are on the Motupepe Reserve beachfront, that was a much more significant area for the wildlife that was there at the time. There was originally in the previous bylaw a square that sort of jutted out into that area, which is now prohibited. We didn't decide to reinstate that as a result of the submissions, because it was has historically had some issues around enforcement for one of the rangers out there gave us that feedback. It's really difficult to tell when you're standing out there whether you are in a legitimate controlled exercise area or whether your dog trots off 3 feet to the left and now they're in a prohibited area and they can therefore get stung with an infringement fine. So this was to simplify it and make it a little bit more clear about where dogs can actually be at low tide. Also, we didn't want them jogging across over to the Pohara side of things as well.
Thank you. Like I said, Councillor Butler has something.
Yeah, I think also it recognises that it's a dog exercise area very close to Tākaka. So, and it is a very popular place for people to go. So, yeah, I endorse the decision there. Yeah.
Okay, on to J. We're looking to change the Pohara Beach from Eastern Camp Boundary to Selwyn Street Reserve. This is currently seasonally prohibited just over the summer months in general. You can't take a dog there at all. However, we had some submissions in support of potentially changing this to just a leash control provision over those busy summer months so that people can still walk their dogs right the way down the beach, but in that particularly busy area, they just have to have them on leash control through, I believe, December to November to March. There are some wildlife concerns down at the other end of the beach as well, which is why we took that previous exercise area out from the other end of the beach. That's the end where there's more wildlife concerns. The rest of the beach, we don't have as much data on that being an issue.
And in terms of so people walk down Pohara Valley, lots of people walk their dogs out of there, and during that part of the year, they just pop it on a leash till they wander through past the camp, and had you in terms of that, was it when till March? November till March?
Yes.
Do you think we're right there? I mean, the reason, there's the wildlife aspect to some extent in that corner, but also it's also about a whole bunch of holidaymakers on the beach, but they're not there in March.
When it's March, it was more through to March, I believe.
Beginning
March,
March,
the end of February.
Jan, Feb, okay. Yeah. Thank you. I think it's a good adjustment. Otherwise, people were going to be, wandering up along the road, which was Thank you.
As discussed previously, we want to remove the Pohara Top 10 holiday park from the dog control policy and bylaw, just to enable, as per the same thing as Collingwood, for that to be managed outside the bylaw, but still have the Dog Control Act to fall back on if there are any issues out there, just to give them a bit more flexibility. Cool. There was a lot of support to change Liger Bay from a time or seasonally restricted area as it currently is to a controlled exercise area, and we support those submissions and propose to change that to an exercise area year round.
I think that's a good adjustment too. I spent a lot of time at Liger Bay, and it's not somewhere where I've seen a lot of trouble or issues really with dogs. I mean, sometimes people have their dogs bounding around when there's a few people having a picnic tea, and you just got to deal with that, I suppose. But largely, I think this is a really good response to make, and I think separating it out from what happens at Tata is a good idea because they're quite different. Although near each other, I think they're quite different in the way that they are used in terms of dogs and who's there, and people aren't going to go from Tata into Liger to walk their dog, and so support what you're doing there. Thank you.
Great. No change to Tata. We acknowledge that was previously discussed extensively alongside the community a few years ago, and that keeping it as it is largely supported. But moving on to the next change is I'll run through both of them together. M and N, we're proposing to remove the Awaroa vehicle access point and also Tonga, Adele and Fisherman Island foreshores from the dog control policy and bylaw. This is just because it's replicated in another bylaw and we want to simplify things, just have all that information in one place. It's also an area that's pretty challenging. Well, I'm not aware of any circumstance where our dog rangers have actually had a presence in that area. It's more managed by DOC day to day. Yeah. So yeah, dogs are still prohibited on those islands. It's just managed under different legislation. We had some significant feedback from the community opposed to Tokunga Reserve by Split Apple Rock being included in the bylaw, so we've removed that, so it won't be showing up anymore. It was just that area in there, but there was essentially no support for including it as an exercise area, so it's been taken out.
Councillor Maru has something to say about that?
Yeah, thanks. Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have an issue with it coming up, but I guess the balance of the feedback was because at that stage it looked like the only dog exercise controlled area in those bays around that. So, you know, from my recollection, the major concern was everybody was going to travel there to use it for that, which may not be the case in terms of some of the other changes, but I don't have an issue with it coming up.
It may be, through the chair, maybe reassuring to know that while it's been removed from the bylaw, it's subject to the conditions of the Dog Control Act. People can still exercise their dogs. We're just not going to direct them there anymore, which I think was what the community was concerned about. So, yeah, happy with that one. So moving on to Little Kaiteriteri Beach, we are proposing to change this from a leash controlled area to a time or seasonally restricted area, as set out in attachment 3 of the report, but I can read through what that would entail. So for Little Kaiteriteri Beach, that means November to February, dogs will be prohibited except between the hours of 8 a.m. and 11 a.m. just during those key summer months, and it also lines up to give a little bit of extra protection during those key nesting times as well, hence why we've brought it back to November instead of December. But it does still provide some a few hours for off-lead exercise in the morning. You'll also note that we've changed the hours over those summer months because the sun rises earlier during that time, and so penguins are doing that commute a little bit earlier as well. The rest of the year, dogs would be prohibited between 5 p.m. and 9 a.m., leaving the beach as a controlled exercise area between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. And this essentially is a little bit of a slight deviation from one of the options that we received. The votes, they're not really votes, but the indications from the submitters were split on the two seasonal / time-bound options that we provided, and so we tried to sort of strike that balance there. If you put them together, that was kind of the most popular solution in terms of a concept, and so that's what we've tried to do to accommodate. And we acknowledge that, you know, this is a highly contested area, and it may still be an unpopular choice, but we're hoping that this has struck a balance that still provides an increased level of protection for the wildlife in the area, while still allowing for some off-leash dog exercise during some other times as well.
Councillor Maru.
Thank you. I thought there was the Little Kaiteriteri dog bylaw review. I remember talking to the chair earlier in the week and saying that I'm pretty sure through the submission period I said where communities were split and divided that it was probably unlikely that either party was going to be 100% happy with where this landed, but they couldn't come to a solution in terms of the residents of Little Kaiteri, so we have. So my only question really is the difference between Dummy Bay, Stevens Bay and Little Kaiteriteri in terms of so if I'm reading this right, if we go to the Dummy Bay one, dogs prohibited between 8 p.m. and 8 a.m. Sorry, prohibited, but so it gives an evening opportunity in Dummy Bay and Stevens Bay that isn't there for Little Kaiteriteri. And I just raise it in terms of for people that are lucky enough to be retired and living a Little Kaiteriteri with a dog. Summer works for them, but for working people, that doesn't give them access for any exercise on the beach during summer. Because previously it was earlier in the morning, wasn't it? It was 5 to something or other. So that's, I guess it's my only query. Essentially, working people in Little Kaiteriteri won't have access to exercise their dog on Little Kaiteriteri Beach between November and March. But I guess they do at Dummy Bay and Stevens Bay. I just want to absolutely highlight that's what I'm reading. That's, I think, where this is being proposed. And I'm not sure if I have a view, to be fair, because you're right, it was split so much down the middle. But thank you for finding and recommending a compromise. So I'm happy to go with the recommendation because I haven't got a better answer. But it's just a no.
In terms of the penguins, Matt, do you feel like this will offer enough protection?
It will offer increased protection from what it previously was. I'm aware that that whole area is a penguin hotspot, just all around the kind of rocky coast. But it's also a highly populated area where people enjoy taking the dogs and walking the dogs. And the current timings just they were clashing too much with human interaction and penguins. This is just a shift away to try and encourage that protection. So it will also need to be done with kind of education and community support and a general willingness for cohesion amongst residents and visitors and dog walkers. And
Councillor Butler.
Yeah, just to take that a bit further, Matt, just about, because there were comments about getting penguins to shift. And would you be able to just explain the way that penguins live and whether actually shifting them to other locations is actually a feasible option or not? Because my understanding is that it's not, but it would be just good to hear from a science point of view.
Through the chair, you can't shift penguins. They will head out to sea, they'll feed, they'll come back and find a rocky coast when it's time to breed. They've been doing that for many years. It's kind of akin to herding cats, I guess. That's just the prime spot for these animals, which is why there's such clashes and contention between that highly populated area and all the penguins. If you could relocate penguins up the coast, they'll probably swim out and come back to where they were first there.
Thank you.
Do we want to discuss Dummy or Stevens Bay? They were sort of next on the list, but we've kind of discussed them now already. Are we happy with those resolutions as well?
I think we're okay to move on.
Okay. Just a slight change to the way that the Rewaka River mouth to Tapu Bay Reserve has been mapped. We just kind of reduced that size of the exercise area. I mean, essentially, it doesn't, in practice, people can still exercise their dogs outside of that area, but we're mapping it that way just to reflect that we'll probably put in some signage to encourage people to, if they're starting their walk down by the river mouth, to head left and move away from that river mouth, because where the fresh water meets the salt, that's a prime area for wildlife and wading birds that we just wanted to steer people in the other direction for their exercise. We know that it's still a significant area for birds, and we heard that in the feedback that we received in the submissions as well, which we're aware of, but it is difficult when you're restricting other areas, other bays around the area, and we just wanted to make sure that there was still an option. I know it's an unpopular one, to the thought of perhaps getting in your car and driving down the road a little bit, if you were in Kaiteriti and you were working, but there is still a place that is nearby where you can take your dog for a jolly good run along, still under what's proposed. The next one is removing the Mariri closed landfill from the dog control policy for the reasons stated when we were discussing this earlier, with the Rotatai closed landfill as well. We're just slightly recommending to adjust the seasonal restriction at Lower Moutere Recreation Reserve We initially had that in it for November to February, and we're just going to be changing that, or suggesting to change that to December to February, just reducing it by a month. That restriction, that was previously a dogs prohibited area that we wanted to make available for people to exercise their dogs for most of the year. The only reason why we still suggest to prohibit it over the summer is just because there's a cricket pitch there, and in general we don't have dogs on sports grounds, and just in that prime time when it's being used as such to keep dogs away from that. But it's still, there is a clause in there that still enables it to be used during those times for dog obedience and tracking exercises. The next one is just to include the Old Mill walkway in the Schedule 5 instead. So we're just moving that description to the Great Taste Trail, and to change the mapping to reflect that this section is a controlled exercise area. On the mapping we'd initially done, there was an on-leash requirement kind of cutting through where the exercise area was. That used to be yellow, and it was just a little bit of a contradiction. So that's a staff recommendation to clear that up.
Have we got the formal name correct? The trail?
I see shaking of heads, so perhaps not. Tasman's Great Taste Trail. I'm not sure.
Is that that's the formal name?
Okay, we can add a resolution to change that.
Can we just check
wherever it's been.
Dwayne's looking, so they might be doing something else, but
I'm sorry, I was sorry if the name is just simply a minor clarification to the name of the Great Taste Trail, I think we can take care of that under the editing rights of the chair.
yeah. Okay, but can we just clarify that formally? Yeah, please. Thank you. Thank you, Robin. Riding shotgun, yeah, great.
Due to that change to have the Old Mill walkway now in Schedule 5, we're just adjusting the description of Ruby Bay to remove the reference to the walkway as well, just separating those two locations out. But the zoning of that area hasn't changed. It's just the way that we'd like to describe it. We are also suggesting a change in mapping and the description for on Keena Peninsula, the LEH Agent Reserve, which initially was proposed as a dogs prohibited area, including the surrounding peninsula. So we're suggesting to change that to just the foreshore and estuary area surrounding the LEH Agent Memorial Reserve. And that's just to allow dogs to still access right the way through, and also have access to that inland part of it while still protecting the nesting areas on the outskirts.
I seem to be able to anticipate your points of intervention, Councillor Maru.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just checking with the change of that and the overlays that we've looked at the land, and I know now that the dog bylaw can go beyond land that's owned by council, but one of the submitters raised that he didn't think that TC owned all the land here. It's the land that we've gazetted now, either DOC or TGC owned. There's no private land or anything.
So I, through the chair, I checked the reserves layer, and the reserve is owned by TDC. We acknowledge that the community was involved in fundraising, and we're hoping that this solution does provide something for that community to enable dogs to still exercise in this area. However, it's important to note that in the Dog Control Act, there is quite a generous definition of a public place and where you can apply a dog control bylaw to. So essentially, if the public has access to it, you can apply the bylaw to it.
Great clarification and to understand that. Anything further on this area? Body Estuary Park?
Yes, Hori Estuary Park was probably the main reserve along the Waimea Inlet that we had feedback on in terms of the opposition to have an outright prohibition there, and there were some suggestions in the submissions that we don't necessarily need to go straight to a complete prohibition, that maybe leash control could be an option as well. So we've adjusted the mapping here so that the vegetation along the shoreline is still a prohibited area. However, there is leash control access through the rest of that park.
Any comment from you, Matt, about that?
None from me. No. We spoke with the reserves team who kind of acknowledge its popularity alongside the work which has been done in the estuary for restoration, and we felt that that's a good compromise of highlighting the need to protect that estuary edge whilst also encouraging recreation all the way through there.
Councillor Ellis, you're nodding there.
Oh, yeah, more than happy with that kind of solution. I mean, that's been the key all the way through, is trying to find a balance, and I think you've struck it here as well.
Thank you.
The final location-based change that we are suggesting is to change Railway Reserve from a leash control area back to a controlled exercise area. This is just behind Jubilee Park. That had initially been proposed to be an on-leash area, just to be consistent with the fact that it was on the Great Taste Trail, and that's what we're proposing for a lot of those. Tasman's Great Taste Trail. Oh. However, it is actually quite a wide section of the trail. There's grass on either side. We had some feedback letting us know that, and so we're recommending a change back to the current status quo for that one. The other thing that I will,
Oh, yes, Councillor Shelbus.
I was just, those sort of ones obviously just get me thinking about, it's really going to be about signage and letting people know, because this is the hardest thing with when you change from, say, you go one rule to another. So yeah, just once again, signage. So.
It's going to be crucial, isn't it, about, when we can signal in a way that where there are changes and that it's obvious to people and they'll know what it means fairly easily, and we can have a further conversation, I think, about that.
Through the chair, that would bring me on to another point. Oh yes, yes, let's do that one first. We are tabling a further resolution on Tasman's Great Taste Trail, where the words are correct. This was originally set out as Tadmore Valley Road to Whale Valley Road, and we are pulling back the prohibited area. The reason for this prohibition initially was because we have a land use agreement with the forestry company 141, and that prohibited section that we put in the draft bylaw was basically brought over from Tasman's Great Taste Trail bylaw. I'm not sure if the bylaw was actually called that though. And because of that agreement, we'd brought that over. However, we noted that that prohibited section actually extended right the way up into Tapawera, which we felt wasn't necessary and didn't really align with the agreement that we have for that land use. So what we're proposing to change it to is to cut off at the point of the 141 occupation. We've had some staff check easements along the rest of the trail and talk to staff in the infrastructure team as well, and in reserves, and we can't identify a reason why that would have been suggested as a prohibited, why it would extend up that far. So we are recommending that we change that section to an on-leash area, the same as what's proposed for the majority of the trail as well.
Thank you. A lot of work goes in behind all of this, doesn't it? Yes, thanks. Thank you. So we've got the adjustment on the resolution here to incorporate this amendment. haven't we?
Yes.
Yes. So when we should we pass a resolution and that's incorporated there. Councillor Shellcrass.
Yeah, I know this is one that Stewie brought up with me, and the locals would be happy with that adjustment. So yeah, happy to support that.
Right. Moving on, one other point that I wanted to just raise was the date that we're proposing that the new bylaw comes into force, which is the 31st of March next year. And that's for a couple of reasons. One is to make sure that we do a good job of communications, and sign development isn't going to be a quick task. We need to make sure that the communication on those is really clear, and that we've got them everywhere we need them to be. We also don't want to change the rules mid-season. Lots of different locations, lots of different areas have different rules over the summer, and we don't want to come in the middle of something that's a change from the norm and then do another change just to add to the confusion. So there'll be a few months before this comes into effect. The next section to run through would be to note the locations that we aren't recommending any change to. I'm not sure whether that's something we want to run through in detail or talk about by exception, if there's any concerns about.
Councillor Martin has a concern by the looks. So I think if yes, I think if each panel member wants to bring up something specific, then we address that way.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's just a question. So McKee Domain, so we've removed the prohibitions from the other camping grounds. But McKee Domain, I take it McKee Memorial Domain is part of the camping ground as well? Or is it just the strip on the beach? And it's probably in the map, I could probably answer that myself. Yeah. I'm just interested in the difference between, if it includes the camp, the difference between the other camps and McKee Memorial Domain. On the page.
Yeah.
That is the camp. Yeah. So I know it's a popular holiday spot for Motueka, plus some Motueka families who possibly have four-legged friends that go camping currently, I suspect. So I'm just, and I get the ecological statement that's made in the report on page 44. But I also suspect you could say the same around the estuaries surrounding the other camps that we've just changed. So my question is, why different from McKee?
Can I just quickly say that the land there, the stuff that's got the hatch through it is managed by council as recreation reserve, and then the strip that you can see that's green where the bush is, that's managed by DOC as a scenic reserve. And yes, your original question about it covering the camp is correct. It is the prohibited, but I'll let you guys answer the actual question about the.
Oh, sorry, I might have a quicker question for Anna. So currently in the reserve management plan for McKee Domain, the campground, are dogs allowed or prohibited?
I can quickly look it up for you. I can't remember off the top of my head, but yeah, most of our reserve management plans refer to the bylaw, and they just would only say have a policy about either saying what the last bylaw said or saying this should be looked at, like, you know, protection of birds should be looked at in the next review. So it leaves it up to this process rather than says what has to happen. Yeah.
I don't think I'm going to lose any sleep over because it sounds like it's probably the status quo. Okay.
Councillor Butler.
Chair. Yeah, I just wondered if we could have a clarification of the Motueka Sands bit, because there is DOC ownership in there, and it's just a bit confusing to me as to who's in charge of what and what's prohibited. Are we able to get the picture up?
Yeah, well, that's funny that I can start to talk through the chair. This is, yeah, you're right. This is a bit of a complex area because it is owned by DOC. We've continued to include it in the bylaw at their request. However, they are undertaking their own consultation around the future of the sand spit. We're not sure what they will decide in the future. It's highly unlikely that they would pull back on that prohibited area. They support the continuation of it as it stands at the moment, but it could be, depending on the outcome of that consultation, that at some point in the future that responsibility shifts. But at the moment, we don't want to send that wrong message saying if we remove it, that it's a free-for-all. And that's certainly not something that DOC supports. So for now, we've left that as is.
So in terms of compliance, are we able to cover that? And what is our arrangement with DOC for covering it with compliance? Is it just that we treat it as if it's a TDC thing?
Through the chair. No, we treat it as a TDC and we do monitoring checks on it. Though DOC have been very kind in putting up during the nesting seasons, they put up a gazetted rope that goes around saying no dogs past this point. And they do probably more regular checks than we do in that area, as that's quite a hot spot for them in that whole sand spit. And they also have warrants under the Dog Control Act to take action if they need to. But we don't get many reports of dog issues past that point in the prohibition. It's quite common knowledge that it's a prohibited area, but they do still erect waratahs with ropes, dog prohibition during nesting seasons. But
so in terms of the north, going north, that's just a dog, there's no particular control on that, it's just the routine? Or is it DOC owned as well?
Through chair, DOC owned as well, but it is under their management plan and through the bylaw, it is an exercise area, under control exercise area, and it is used as such, as well as further north is also used for horse exercising as well. It's quite a hot spot for exercising out of animals, but this area is very important to the bird life, and we need to recommend that.
Thanks for that clarification.
Councillor Ellis, talked into it.
Thank you. I'm just wondering about consistency because, I agree with this and the take, but can you just give us a bit of a description as to why we'd take places like Araroa out, but include this because you said that it's controlled by DOC. So can you just explain why that difference of treatment?
Yeah, I can speak to that through the chair. It's the Araroa and the islands and that sort of thing that's covered under the Able Tasman Resource Management Plan, which is another plan that may change, or this may change, and then you've got inconsistencies. We don't want to create. We've got the same rule reiterated multiple places. Also, how remote it is, we don't often have our TDC rangers on that location, whereas DOC do have their rangers on those locations.
Thank you, that's a good explanation.
I'll just through the chair add to that as well. There's also the Able Tasman Scenic Foreshore Reserve bylaw covering those ones, whereas this doesn't come into that catch-all.
Anything further, panelists? Not on this part.
There is another resolution around agreeing to replace the title page information about when the dog control bylaw is made with the table on the following page. Just more of an administrative how we're presenting the information. And that's resolution 7. And then I suggest moving back to the clause changes.
Yes. Now or after we look at the rest of the resolutions, because I think there's some commentary perhaps or questions. I will maybe go with the clause changes of, yep, and then we can look at the remainder of the resolutions.
Okay. Page. Okay. Recommendation 2 will refer you to attachment 1 and table 1, the clause changes in response to submissions. The first one is to add clause 3.8 to minimise risks to the welfare of wildlife. And also for the next point, point B, add wildlife protection to clause 6.1.2. The reasons for those is that those additions support objective 4A of the Dog Control Act to ensure that dogs do not injure, endanger or cause distress to any stock, poultry, domestic, animal or protected wildlife, and that provides alignment with the purpose of the bylaw as well. We're also suggesting to add clause 6.1.1, 6.1.6, educate the public on the environmental impacts of dogs on local wildlife and ways to mitigate risks. And that's for similar reasons as well. We are also suggesting to add a definition.
Councillor Butler's got something on there.
Thank you. Yeah, just the issue of holiday makers and renting batches or coming in motels or camping or whatever. And how are we going to do that? Have we got any strategies for informing holiday makers about the dog bylaw? Or can we actually develop some strategies, maybe of leaflets or something in holiday batches or something like that? Because I think that is quite a big issue around all of these coastal sites and top of the south.
To the chair, yeah, we're developing some education strategies across the district to inform all the public, including holiday makers and stuff, of these changes in the requirements, not just in relation to the dog control bylaw or the Act, but also in relation to protection of wildlife across the district as well. So we're working on a strategy to get a whole bunch of people together and do sort of quite a few key locations where there's a lot of changes in the bylaw, but also a lot of protected wildlife that we want to inform the public and holiday makers of.
Thank you.
Councillor Maru.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's just a couple of questions. So firstly, I get why we add in 3.8 in terms of the reference to wildlife, but I'm also interested in if something occurs. So through the hearings, it was brought up that there's already an act under, must be DOC or something, in terms of a maximum of $20,000 fine for harm to wildlife. So who would use it? Is that a DOC Act, or is that something, Shannon, that your team could also use, or would you pursue prosecution underneath the Dog Bylaw Act?
The maximum fines mentioned in the Act through prosecution. So the infringement fines are the cap of what we can infringe for. Anything that we believe would constitute a serious offence, we would go through prosecutions, and that's where those larger fines come into play.
Right, and then I'm sure that you'll have a robust system under 6.15 for honorary dog ranges, but that whole thing scares me a little bit. If I take part of Motueka as an example, because we've got so extremes on both sides, so I'm sure you'll have a robust system, and I'd love to think that perhaps they would just a role of education, because from a Motueka sense, assistance, surveillance, and dog exercise and prohibited areas is probably a wrong word. Maybe take observations or make that word, I think, is probably the only thing that will stick out in here for some people who don't have dogs. But I guess the assisting and surveillance is probably not flash wording in this. So could we water it down? Could we take it out? Could we just have council may appoint honorary dog rangers whose primary role would be an educational one? It's the primary role. There may be some others. It's not explicitly. I could just see this happening of wildlife advocates taking photos of dog owners taking photos of wildlife. I don't think it's going to be helpful. So good luck on how you recruit those honorary rangers if you choose to do so. But I'd be more comfortable if it was an educational
through the chair. Yes, at the moment we don't have any honorary rangers. It just gives us the freedom to do so, but we have spoken about it and it will be more of an education standpoint or as a sort of a tour-up facility going alongside another fully warranted ranger as a patrolling mechanism. But it is at this stage a purely educational standpoint, but we don't have any.
So, Madam Chair, with the guidance from staff, I'd be really happy to add another one to the list that we just delete. They may also assist in surveillance and dog exercise in prohibited areas out of 6.15. So it's on page 88 of our pack, and it's 6.15. So it would just be the council may appoint honorary dog rangers whose primary role would be an educational one, full stop. Happy to take advice, but I'm also happy to move that amendment to the policy. Page 88. And that's 6.15. Yes. Yeah.
Through the chair, that sentence is there as the with assistance of a may also assist, so it would be with another ranger of another warranted ranger. They won't be out there on their own doing surveillance of prohibited areas. That's just there as a catch-all to say that they are allowed to be there with a warranted ranger assisting in the surveillance of those prohibited areas.
So my question, Madam Chair, for Councillor Shedd, is there any issue by taking that line out for you, or would you prefer it to stay in?
Through the chair, I would prefer it stayed in, but it's at the end of the day, it's your decisions to make. But I think it is stated as primarily education role. We would want people that would be on the beaches, sort of having a chat, having a talk, educating people on the responsibilities, but not actually enforcing or surveying those areas.
I'm happy to take advice. So,
Kim.
Thank you, Chair. So just in listening to that conversation, I think the first sentence does carry the connotations of the second sentence. And I think what the councillor is saying is that just having the second sentence might have an unintended consequence, and taking it out wouldn't detract from the intent of the fact that there's a primary education role that doesn't rule out that other roles through a proper considered process can be added to that. So my sense is that we could consider that.
Through the chair, there's another suggestion that we could make, which is to add in a little more clarification to that sentence to say they may also assist a dog ranger in surveillance. And
and the reason that we're speaking about surveillance particularly there is because and where is it that people will understand the role and function and parameters of an honorary dog ranger? Where's the primary place that is found?
Through the chair, that's right here. The primary function of an honorary dog ranger is education.
Yes, and where does that definition live? So we have other honorary rangers, don't we? Have honorary.
We've got the potential to have.
Yeah. So I'm just trying to understand where the definition of the role lives.
Be in the definitions, interpretations. 16.
I was thinking more widely outside of. This is the place.
We're just
where a
checking
definition will be made.
through the chair, we're just checking the Dog Control Act because there's reference
Right.
to them within that.
Okay.
We'll just see if that.
We'll have a little
aligns.
pause while we're working that out. Thank I'm thinking that we might have a cup of tea break. It's 20 to 11. Quite warm in here, isn't it? So let's have a break for 15 minutes. We'll come back at 5 to 11, and that'll just give a bit of time to for you to inform us about where that definition, role definition, lives and where it should live. Thank you. Could we just have some feedback on the matter that was raised before our little break, please?
Through the chair, yeah, the honorary dog ranger is defined in the Act in section 12 as giving territorial authorities the power to appoint honorary rangers, as well as an interpretation. Where the definition we would say is honorary is an unwarranted ranger, which means they don't have any powers of enforcement, be an educational only role. And we would propose to change the definition in that 6.1.5, I believe, to remove that second sentence as you were stating, Councillor.
So we'll just have the first sentence of the yes, and we've got a resolution there. Please to remove. Okay, and interesting to see, isn't it, in the Dog Control Act, just very simple statement in there with little definition or scope or anything at all around the role. So should we ever appoint honorary dog rangers, there'd be a few hands shoot up for that role, I imagine. But how, you know, I guess, yeah, I don't know what the parameters we have around, you know, defining that role really clearly. Anywho, thank you. Thanks for bringing that up, Councillor. And you have something further. Great.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And through the break also it was confirmed that McKee is status quo, so there's no change in the bylaw to what is currently happening there, so I'm happy with that.
Okay, that's been established. Thank you. Where are we up to? I think we are, Kat, are we back with you?
Yes, through the chair, our next clause change in response to submitters was to add a definition for working dog, which we're saying has the same meaning as in section 2 of the Dog Control Act. That's just for extra clarity. E and F, we want to correct some clause reference errors in clauses 17.2, 17.3, and also in 18.4. We would, for G, we recommend adding a disability assist dog into clause 20.2a. That includes that disability assist dogs are exempt from dog prohibited areas, just to clarify that point. 20.2 has a clause error as well, which we're recommending we amend to the correct one.
Is that 20.3?
20.3, weird 8, doing it again. Yep.
A lot of letters there, all good.
Okay. Sorry.
Oh, Councillor Maru.
Sorry, Madam Chair. Sorry, Kat, if you go back to or a disability assist dog, it's actually 20.2. 20.2a is a different clause. So it's just, you might, so it's a primary part of that 20.2.
Oh, okay. So it's just removing the A.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's gone.
Thank you for bringing that to our
Pick up,
attention.
thank you.
Change the location name in Schedule 4 from Old Library Site to Takaka Memorial Reserve.
Mhm.
Also change the location description in Schedule 4 from Motueka Sandsbit south of a line drawn through the point NZ map grid, etc., to Motueka Sandsbit south of latitude marker 41.1200. Just a little bit of a that's a suggestion from Doc around making that description a little easier to as easy as possible to interpret. And also to add an explanatory note, other parts of the Tasman district are also prohibited to dogs under different legislation, such as the Able Tasman Foreshore Scenic Reserve Bylaw 2016 and the National Parks Act 1980 to Schedule 4. That's to support the public being aware that this is not the be all and end all of dog rules in the district.
Yeah. Great, thank you.
So we've got the added resolution there, which we've already discussed around removing that extra sentence. And then moving on to 4. We have removed the registered for the first time in New Zealand after 1st of July 2006 from clause 4.1. It's just considered no longer necessary after this length of time. We've just added.
All good? Got your spot? Yeah.
Added that the bylaws being made in accordance with the Local Government Act 2002 into section 11.1. That's just a further clarifying point there. As I spoke to earlier on, we've just changed, there was a placeholder for the date that the bylaw was going to come into force, and we've set that out as 31st of March 2025 to allow time for education, signage, and to not change any of the regulations during confusing seasonal times. Change the references of dog ownership to dog management in section 15.1. That shifts the emphasis from ownership to dog management, and that just better reflects how it's written in the Dog Control Act. We have proposed to remove the summer months definition and included references to the seasonal prohibitions alongside each of the locations. And that's just because there are different ones for different places. We can't have a single cohesive definition. And to avoid any confusion for the public, if we state what those seasonal times are directly alongside that location, that will minimise any chance of confusion. And we've added a time or seasonally restricted areas definition as well. It hasn't been, not all of these have been noted. It's just a catch-all for what is now recommendation 5 to decline to make other changes suggested by submitters for the reasons set out in table 3. Happy to go into any of those if there are any questions, but otherwise I'll just take the table as read.
Are there any matters that councillors want to bring up in terms of table 3? If you have to, okay.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Only that the discussion around working dogs and discounted fees, I absolutely accept that that'll get done at annual plan or LTP process. So it's the right place for it, because I'm not sure I sit on that anyway. So that was one of the key things that came up from one of the Golden Bay submitters in terms of discounts for that. So outside of this, get it, and we'll have that discussion at annual plan or long-term plan time with fees and charges.
Thank you. Anything else to table 3? Councillor Butler?
I don't know if it's the right place to bring it up or not.
Is it to do with table 3? Declines to make the changes suggested by submitters for the reasons set out in table 3. So changes.
Yeah.
Is it where you're at?
Well, maybe it's a more general comment, but it's just about.
Could you use your mic, please?
About when we've made the changes and whether we've decided to make changes, and then we've decided to, not actually make changes according to the requested changes, but there is an issue to do with the shifting of attention onto other areas. So I think we just need to be aware of that that if we've decided to not make changes, but there will be consequences of pressure where people that from on a wildlife point of view, that areas will come under increased pressure because we've prohibited other areas. I think that's just a point that it's just worth considering, and especially for compliance, an awareness that okay, we haven't made the changes, but there will be issues about changes in the way people actually use those areas, because maybe there'll be more pressure on the ones where people can go.
Thank you. Nothing further around table 3. Okay.
So those are all the resolutions that staff wanted to speak to and highlight. We've been through now all the changes that we're recommending. We've talked by exception around the ones that we're noting are going to stay the same as in the draft. And we've run through all the clause changes where recommended by staff or submitters. So I believe we're now going through them all. Oh, sorry. We've got some further recommendations that we've got in the it'll be now 10. We've changed. Sorry. Looking at 10 in the recommendations.
Yeah.
Say tentatively. Just as with most things. Yes. So we've got a recommendation in there to prompt staff to consider the discounted dog registration fees for working dogs when we do fees and charges for next year. So that will be taken into consideration during that process.
Yep.
Note that staff will propose to increase dog registration fees generally as part of that process as well, to support the funding, proactive funding of education and compliance activity. Also to note that staff will continue to explore the development of a dog park within the Tasman district and will report progress to the Environment and Regulatory Committee by June 2025. And then it's just around delegating any minor editorial amendments to the chair or the chief executive.
Yep, we're going to confirm the minutes. And then we've got a recommendation to Tasman District Council that anything that you'd like to
so
there?
As part of the bylaw making process, we need to take care of what's in section 155 of the Local Government Act. And so the recommendation to Tasman District Council will be that the hearing panel agrees that the proposed Tasman District Council dog control policy and bylaw 2024 is the most appropriate form of bylaw for addressing perceived problems in relation to public safety related to dog behaviour, the protection of wildlife from disturbances caused by dogs, and the promotion of responsible dog ownership, and ensuring that shared public spaces are safe and enjoyable for all community members too, in relation to dog use and access. And we're also noting that the proposed bylaw does not give any rise to any implications under the New Zealand Bill of Rights Act 1990.
Councillor Ellis and then Councillor Butler.
Thank you. Just a very quick question, and it might seem a little trivial, but we talk about dog ownership in that point. Do we want to talk about dog management? Just to keep it consistent with the rest of the bylaw, or are we happy with that?
Happy to change that wording to management as well. Yes, it's through the chair, valid point, and agree with making the change. That is a change that we made in another part of the bylaw.
Although that might be two different things in a slightly different context, isn't it? So if you're out with your dog and how you're managing your dog is one thing, but then responsible ownership would relate to some other things like making sure your dog's registered. I don't know, in this context.
The Dog Control Act speaks to both ownership and management. So the responsible dog ownership is microchipping and registration, whereas management is the control of dogs.
No, I believe that is ownership.
So we've got the right language here. Or we're wanting to explicitly have both mentioned, given we're considering that they're different things.
Yes.
Very closely related to each other.
Yes.
Are you happy with that, Councillor Ellis? Yes. Councillor Butler?
Yeah, I've got two questions. One is implications under the New Zealand Bill of Rights Act. Was that in the previous one? Is that kind of a standard thing, or is it in there because we submitters raised the issue about Bill of Rights?
Through the chair, that's a standard thing to take into consideration, and it's been through legal review.
Okay, thanks. And the other thing was, I'm just wondering if it's worth putting in there as a note, DOC's role in the Wildlife Act, because, you know, DOC has a role under the Wildlife Act, which sort of intersects with the dog bylaw.
And the purpose of that would be to
make it clear what the role of DOC is and what the role of the council is, because you know, the DOC under the Wildlife Act, it would be helpful to explain under the Wildlife Act. So if say for example a penguin is killed by a dog, then that becomes an offence under the Wildlife Act, which is administered by DOC.
The chair, it's actually offence under both. It's an offence under the Dog Control Act under Section 57 as well as under the Wildlife Act. It would be my opinion that this isn't the space to talk about the roles of different functions, as this is a bylaw for the control of dogs and protection of wildlife through the control of dogs. Section 20 of the Dog Control Act doesn't really give us power to define roles of different entities.
Shannon, I'll just get you to bring your mic a little closer to you. Thank you. And is there it was on. I think you know, is there anywhere in the bylaw where we meant, you know, provide any context around how this relates to other acts and other agencies' responsibilities.
Through the chair, yes. So we tabled a resolution to add in a section where we mentioned about the prohibitions being also under the Able Tasman Scenic Reserves bylaw,
Yes,
as well as in the
right.
national reserve parks. So I think this isn't really the space to define the roles of other agencies, but we are aware of the functions of other agencies as well, and we do work closely with DOC around wildlife instances as well.
I mean, I think my point was just for the for people who are reading and wanting to be clear about what they're allowed to do and what they're not allowed to do. That's really my thought. It's not so much for us, but it's actually for clarity for the users, the readers, people visiting the district, etc.
It might be some of the educational material, perhaps there's reference to, and also, I'm not sure, but what I'm hearing is that in terms of context for our bylaw, that it's not perhaps so irrelevant a spot to refer to it.
Through the chair, I might just add that, I mean, the primary purpose of our bylaw is to lay down the rules and regulations that this council wants to apply in its community. The law and the rules that apply in other places in relation to other acts will always apply. So they apply regardless of whether you put it in this bylaw or not. And I totally support the approach. Doing it and adding it into the bylaw adds nothing. Putting educational material and explaining things around the way we manage dog control and the communications provide the public is everything, where those lines and responsibilities are.
Thank you. Do you have anything further, Kat?
No, thank you.
Shannon? Anything further from you?
Through the chair, I would like to clarify that we did speak about the education programs that we're working on, and DOC are involved and will be involved in that as well as one of the agencies we want to bring on board with the education around the district.
The final reflection, actually, of all this, a really big process, tremendous amount of work, a lot of work from submitters, putting together their significant submissions. Actually, we'll start with Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've just got this sneaky little question first, just a clarification. So, in swapping around the fees that are proposed here, so it makes a statement that 100% of funding requirements for dog activities will be fees and other charges. So we purposefully, as in not to be any more general rate contribution to dog costs through here, because that's what we're signing up in the bylaw for.
Okay.
So I just want to clarify that. And that's it.
So through the chair, the split, as I understand it, through the financial strategy and the levels of service that are operated is 95% dog self-funding and 5% general rate for the sort of function. So I'm assuming there's some functions in there that can't be sourced from a user pays, so they have to be provided through a general rate.
Through the chair, those functions are probably just the administrative functions of the team. The enforcement and education and all that sort of thing is funded by the registration and infringements issued under the Act.
Okay, thank you. And with that, Madam Chair, I'm happy to move to this. I'm not sure if happy is the right word, but we went on a bit of a journey, didn't we? So I am happy to move.
You're
this.
willing, yeah.
And in terms of we've landed, thank you. So the work that you've put in, I didn't know how you'd get here with a draft report. Went away from deliberations, and certainly from an area that I have a lot of interaction with, we had far lefts, far rights, or ups, downs, whatever you want to say that. And I guess I remember saying it at the hearing is for the community, we have listened and staff have listened, and they couldn't come to a resolution. And so they've asked us to come to a resolution. And I think where we've landed is a compromise that may not be something that everybody celebrates, but actually, I guess the pushback is the community had an absolute opportunity to help drive this and steer this and couldn't. So that's why we're here, to make those decisions, aren't they? And we heard lots of stats and lots of statements, and I guess there's two things that are really clear to me: is there a risk to wildlife from dogs? Absolutely. Is there a risk from every dog? I'm not sure. Have there been shorebirds killed? Absolutely. Have they all been killed by dogs? Again, I'm not sure. I don't think so. And we as people are the worst predators on this world, and so we have this dog control policy around a focus on dogs and dog owners, but at the same time, I've had calls about 4x4 motorbikes just off Motueka Sands, and at the end of the day, the dogs are part of a family that somebody has to take responsibility for. So this is absolutely about people and being responsible owners. And I guess the middle ground we found is that it's always hard to punish responsible, good dog owners for the minority who aren't. And in any peer pressure group, the best way to get cultural change is by the people that do things right to call out people who don't do right. And I think I got called out in a submission, a suggestion that we'd have vigilantes. It's not at all what I'm suggesting, but I was also disheartened to hear through a lot of the submissions that a lot of people just don't make a complaint or make a notification. So how do we get stats? How do we know? So thank you for the work you've done, and I am actually happy with that resolution. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Nicely articulated. Councillor Ellis.
Thank you. I'm happy to second that, Chair. I just want to add, it's been well articulated by Councillor Maru, but I actually want to add my thanks to staff. It has been a mountained process through, and such strong views from all of those within the district. And I have to thank the community as well for being so willing to put their voice forward. I mean, while there has been a lot of information, they've given us so much that we can come to this kind of conclusion and try and strike some balance. And so I ask the community to take care of each other and treat each other with respect as everybody gets used to some of these changes. But I think we've struck the right balance, and I congratulate staff for the effort that you've actually put in to do that. It's quite a phenomenal effort. My only concern coming out of this process is that I want to flag for the future is funding everything through dog registrations and the high level of educational work we're going to have to do. And given that that burden is going to be carried by a part of the population that is actually doing nothing wrong, they are really good dog owners. So that's just something that I would like us to be aware of too, is our dog registration fees are amongst some of the lowest, especially in the region. And it does give people, I'm not keen to make anything too much more onerous. So if we can bear that in mind moving into the future. But I mean, amazing work. I really think we've done amazing work. And it comes down to the community now to own it and do the best that they can with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Nicely said. Councillor Shellcrest.
Yeah, obviously it's been a long process. Like I say, the submissions was lots of passionate people. It's definitely been a journey. I've spent a bit of time going to some of these places, some new places I didn't even know existed. And obviously we're really lucky to have a lot of these areas to do what we do. But obviously I'm a dog lover, I'm an animal lover as well. So I totally get it. I still think it comes down to, for me personally, it's probably less rules but more compliance. The people that, like I say, do as they should, we don't want to punish them too much for the few that are just not pulling their weight. What else have my notes here? Yes, thanks to the staff. There's been lots of maps and things like that, which is obviously really good to get engaged with and see the different areas. So I'm happy with it, and appreciate everyone's, even the councillors, their sort of support as well, and obviously all the staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Butler.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree. Thank you for the work. It's been just a monumental body of work, and in a way, we're actually only just beginning the next stage of the journey because out of this comes, you know, more compliance issues, more monitoring issues, adjustments, because as I said before, there'll be different pressures in different places. And there'll be more reporting, probably changes in reporting, education, and that type of thing. So, and signage, which will all mean kind of working with the community. So, yeah, we're ticking this off today, but I'm fully aware that the next journey is just starting. And having been familiar with the previous dog bylaw, you know, we've certainly explicitly put a focus in this one on the protection of wildlife, which even though it was in the Dog Control Act and we had to do that, but this is a change, I think, because it's now explicit. So I really support that that's being referenced in the new bylaw. And the other thing I'd say is that we've seen an increase in dog ownership of 10% from over the last 5 years. And then with the changes in development, you know, particularly around the criteria area with new houses and all that kind of thing, it has changed the dynamic. So we're in a newish space, and thank you for all the work and good luck going forward.
Thank you, Councillor. Cam, have you got any just final comments you'd like to make?
Yeah, just a few thoughts. Thank you, Chair. I guess just pulling some of these points that the councillors have made together, to my perspective, this is about respecting the connection that people have with dogs, while mitigating the impact on other people and mitigating the impact on wildlife. It's not the only tool for mitigating the impact on wildlife, and as we've heard, we've got colleagues in the Department of Conservation who we work with very closely across a number of fronts. So I think that needs to be acknowledged. But we need to also take heart on that front that our bird numbers are increasing across this district, and so all of these steps that are being taken to mitigate the impact are having a positive effect. And my sense is where you've landed with the bylaw is precisely going to add to that momentum. We've still got big threats to come on that front. We can't fool ourselves that managing dogs is going to be managing our wildlife threats. We do know that we've got bird flu, just a matter of time before it makes its way to our shores, and our colleagues at the Ministry of Primary Industries are taking significant steps to prepare ourselves for what could be quite a devastating impact on wildlife when that finally lands. Message to councillors, thank you very much for the way you've worked with the staff. It's been really heartening to see the interchange and the degree of respect that you've displayed towards staff and indeed towards members of the public when we had some quite heart-warming or heart-feeling sort of explanations come to us through the hearings, and the way you've absorbed that and helped work with the staff to find those solutions is really comforting. And finally, a word to the staff. For what we see today with the 3 people here that are sitting up there, they're all from different groups across the council, and they work together so fantastically well, which I think just shows that when we do integrate our work across the council, we're stronger for it. And I'm really confident that the package that we've got here, while it's never going to be perfect in some people's eyes, it really does display a really strong commitment to listen, to adapt, and to put into a package. And I think it's just well done on all fronts.
Thank you very much. I felt very well served by you all, by staff, and the amount of information you needed to get through, but then present to us in a coherent way. Really big undertaking, but done incredibly well. So I just think there's the level of service has really been excellent to us as a panel. And it's enabled us to get through all of the information, all the submissions and all the approaches that you're suggesting in a way that's quite accessible, I found. And just the work that goes on and behind a big process like this is pretty tremendous, really, from a whole lot of different staff perspectives. So I can't thank you enough for that. And Kat, I particularly appreciated being able to check in with you and us work out, around the process of everything. I thought our submissions day was a really rich day, and it really captured the breadth and also the strength of feeling around the matter. And we can have this formal approach, and we're going to have our bylaw, but then the matters in terms of culture and how we go around, all of us in our community, relating to the environment and wildlife and dogs and people in public places is up to us. And I'd like to imagine that I think some people have learned quite a few things through the process. I could see that in the submission day and some of the comments that people have made to me. And I think if we can slip into the next phase with a really nice culture around how we do that, we'll have an impact through the way we do that on the way that these areas where people, dog, public places and wildlife and environment meet, how that gets enacted there. So, and just to say actually that a lot of the tension points are in the margins. The amount of area that we're covering, and actually all the land that's available for people to take their dogs by default that isn't mentioned in the bylaw, we're focused on the margins, these small points of tension and all, the tricky areas. So I want to acknowledge that. And I'm pretty interested in our education and signage and how we, what we come to around that. And I like that that's being considered. And probably just to say thank you to panel members. I know what you've waded through, and you've approached us in a really considered, thoughtful way. And as much as we could arrive in some balanced place, I think that we've done that today. Thank you to Robin and Elaine on the flight deck today, and that leaves us with only putting the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Well done. And I'll close with a karakia. Unless there are any other little extra bits. No, we're all in. Karakia tātou. Tāwhiri mai ngā hua o te tai ao, mai a papa tua nuku e tākoto nei, kia rangi nui e tu iho nei, tūtiri whakamaua kia tīna, hui e, tae care. Welcome the fruits of the environment. Thank you.